Benjamin Castle are Americans. Watching the footy.
Liam Ryan saying, kick it my way, I want to jump over the pack, and here he comes! Ryan!
This is Buddy Franklin! This is the greatest showman!
Got the handball off to Myers. Myers looking for the lead of Stengel. Gee, they're good. Gee, they're sharp. Razzle dazzle Rioli.
Oh, who else? McDonald!
From inside the centre square. Boys kick the goal. Boys kick the goal. From inside the centre. I can't believe that.
Good time of day, everyone. Welcome to episode 197 of Americans Watching the Footy, our round 21 recap. I am Benjamin Castle coming to you in San Diego.
I am Ethan Castle coming to you from South San Francisco and back home. You know how last week's recap was brought to you by the word bye? Well, this week's recap isn't, because only one game was won by the away team. That includes a couple of sort of neutral-ish games.
You can't really have an episode be brought to you by defeated or deaf period, because that's there pretty much every time, well, except for 3 games this season.
Well, now the question is, do you consider some of these neutral if they're both Victorian teams, but one usually plays at the G and one usually plays at Marvel? If you don't consider those as neutral games, this round really only had one neutral game.
And even that one wasn't fully neutral. You could also go through like the old football video game clips when you got a creative team out there and say that this episode is brought to you by the home team.
I had already thought about this for America's Brownlow. If we record stuff before the grand final is determined, you know how they do like the good luck to whoever, and you know it's the players that can't drink at Brownlow night. Well, I was thinking, you know, we could do like a really bad, obvious voiceover. Not quite as bad as like the voiceover thing, like the video that Homer makes for Lisa for her birthday, but pretty bad.
On the level of I have to go now, my planet needs me?
Not quite. I was thinking more of like, you know, the just as sure as my favorite food is McNuggets. So this was a pretty interesting round in that basically every game was either a complete blowout or down to the wire with like very few regular old football games, you know?
Well, there were 6 games that were within 13 points.
13!
Yes, Anthony.
13!
And the others were, not at least 51 points.
Let's start with one of those blowouts. Western Bulldogs or Footscray, 15-20-110, defeating Melbourne 9-5-59. This could have been a lot more lopsided than it was, considering the Bulldogs' inaccuracy. I mean, at halftime, it was 6-13, and at three-quarter time, it was 11-17, and they were still up by 38 at three-quarter time. This was just a dominant ass-kicking.
It was at the point where they decided to manage Libba for the fourth quarter, and is that his second victory cigar sub out of the year?
I believe so. So if you're unfamiliar with this concept, we're tracking all the subs this year, and they fit into 5 categories. Medical, which is pretty self-explanatory, guy gets hurt. You suck, guy gets subbed out for poor performance. Victory cigar, you're winning by a lot, so you just take out one of your better players and rest them.
Yeah, like they did in round 3 when they were blowing out the Eagles and they subbed out Liberatore for Poulter. Yeah, Poulter's not the sub now.
Unused, which is, I think, our favorite category. And tactical, which is everything else that can range from we just need to shake things up, or we're subbing someone in to get fresh legs, or we're subbing someone in because we need to go faster or smaller, or we need to protect a lead. Really everything else fits under the category of tactical. Also, the we have no idea why they're making that sub fits under the category of tactical.
Which is why the Bulldogs have made, by our calculation, 9 tactical subs this year, despite having a fair run of injuries at times. But also 2 victory cigar subs, both of them being Libba. This was just domination going outward from the middle. Another one of those Bontempelli is the Bulldogs' GOAT games. And there's that argument that's been popping up, for the past, I'd say 4 years at this point. Where's Bont rank all time at the Dogs? He's already on the podium with Ted Whitten and Charlie Sutton, and you can make an argument for him to be at the top of it. I do want to say I love that they brought back the older style jumper, always a fan of the collars, and the Sons of the Scray song as well.
listening to it, I think, like I said, it would be cool if they changed the name back. I had this discussion in our preview, but the newer song is better. Also, like, it was one of the least competitive songs. The idea of, we'll smile whether we win or lose. Like, that's not the message you're trying to set.
That's like in defeat, we always try.
What's that one from?
Win or lose, we do or die. In defeat, we'll always try.
Yeah, the only like reference to losing in a song that I like is like, we'll win the game or know the reason why.
Stanford sucks.
I think New Mexico State also has something like that in theirs.
It's from an old Navy tune, I think. I'm not surprised. We know it is the California drinking song. Go Bears.
Anyway, Bonk was awesome. Adam Treloar playing his 250th. He looks way too young to have 250 games. He looked really good.
Well, remember, he was thrust into games super young because the Giants were just that team when they were founded.
Libba, before getting subbed out, was great at ground level. I get the feeling a sub like this doesn't happen if you have a guy who like is trying to win the Brownlow.
That's why Bond wasn't subbed out.
I mean, Libba's also older and has had more injury history, but nonetheless.
Yeah, you wouldn't see someone like Lockie Neal or Nick Dacos getting a victory cigar sub.
Maybe it was like 5 minutes left, but not at the start of the fourth quarter. Bailey Williams was quietly really good. I feel like I've hardly mentioned him this season. He might have gone this entire season without getting mentioned other than differentiating him from the other Bailey Williams. Like at most, we've talked about him 2 or 3 times. He was really sharp.
He's a bigger sort of wing player. We've seen him have inside jobs in the past. I think without another Bailey being healthy this year, he's had some more wing time and it's worked out. You saw him going opposite Caleb Poulter really most of the time. And Poulter has had a hell of a past 3 or 4 weeks for himself.
Speaking of wing play, Bailey Dale. There have been some games where I've said that he's kind of just picked up stats with uncontested play. No, his stuff in this game was really key to their movement, where he would get to the outside and then send it back to the middle. Like what he did in this game was much more significant than in some of the others.
Less so in terms of the running, but in terms of the just going from halfback flank to the center wing. You'd still obviously have him listed at halfback, but he can venture downfield into that wing spot, reminiscent of Jordan Clark at Frio. Another strong game of the back for Rory Lobb with 10 intercepts. Amazing how quickly he entrenched himself in that space and that he and Liam Jones are not trampling over each other. I honestly think Liam Jones might be just a really good mentor for him in that respect.
It's also, I mean, we've seen Jones at his best in a role where he's not taking one-on-ones and he's kind of roaming around. So this allows him to do more of that. I gotta admit, was wrong about one. Lockie Bramble, there were a lot of times this year where I was questioning why he's in the team. Thought there were other guys more deserving. And within the last few weeks, the coaches at the Dogs have found a way to incorporate him beyond kick-ins where he's setting guys up all around the ground with his running. So, gotta give him credit there. I was wrong on that one. We both were. Also, the Dogs even made an in-game adjustment. Stephen May came out of the game with cracked ribs, which, anytime anyone's got an injury to their midsection, that seems to be what it is. Daniel Turner got plugged in for him, and instead of trying to move a bunch of pieces around, Melbourne threw Turner in the back, and the Dogs just kept going after him, realizing that they had a size mismatch there.
Well, May is not super big for his position in the first place, but with Turner having played so much forward this year by comparison, yeah, that makes complete sense to go after him. You go after the guys that are lower on the depth chart, and I say 9 times out of 10 that usually works, and then the other time, those guys become like one-game legends. And there are a lot of NFL situations like that.
Really not a lot of positives for Melbourne. I guess Max Gawn, just off of numbers, was pretty decent. I thought Ed Langdon was good. He had a high-effort game. But other than that, they were just pretty overwhelmed. Nice for Tom Sparrow to get back in and kick a couple goals. But
Sparrow had a wake-up call by being dropped a week prior, and Langdon did what he could, but there was nobody else to go with him or opposite him. Remember, Caleb Windsor went down with a syndesmosis injury, and he might not be playing again this year. I think it's more likely that he isn't. And we didn't even see Lockie Hunter get a call-up for this game. He would have played his 200th against his old side. He was still kept out. I was also surprised to see Bailey Laurie be kept out because I thought he'd played one of his more solid games this past week. I think they were just trying to back in Tolstrup, especially on the outside, and Sparrow with the center to half forward job, but it really didn't work, unfortunately. I know that a lot of the attention will go to the taller players for the Bulldogs because that's the way it is. But I think this year in general has been a step up for Latham Vandermeer. We knew that he was versatile, and Beveridge had been willing to throw him every which way. But as more of a half-forward flanker this year, I'd say he's helped complete a lot of things, and he had 3 assists in this game. His setup kicks have been pretty sharp, and I think he's one that just doesn't really get talked about because the Bulldogs, I mean, yes, most teams are top-heavy, but it's even more glaring for the Dogs. And before this past month or 6-week stretch, most of the depth pieces didn't step up.
We've frequently been calling for the depth pieces to step up for this team, and he has absolutely done that. Negatives for Melbourne, I mean, there were a lot, but a few that kind of stood out to me above the others. It was a down game for Tom McDonald, who also, I had never seen him get really rattled, but he was on the receiving end of a couple of calls, and it really got to him clearly. It was a lack of maturity for him that I had never really noticed before. Remember when Jake Bowie was in the lineup and they never lost?
17 in a row to start his career, I think, and was a double Rising Star nominee. I think other teams have just mashed him up against taller guys, and I think that's rattled him.
And then Judd McVie, after playing a really good game a couple of rounds earlier, he struggled in this one. I thought Trent Rivers was all right. I think next year is going to be a great year for Rivers because he'll have had the experience of getting tasked with such difficult assignments and then actually have a better supporting cast around him and be able to return to kind of a supporting role himself instead of having to be the guy in that midfield. I think this will pay off for him. But yeah, the Dogs, they look pretty ridiculous right now. And, my hope just remains, don't waste this. You've got a really fun, talented group. Please make us look bad for doubting you and questioning you all this time.
Actually finish top 4 for the first time in the Beveridge era, maybe. If there is any year, though, where a team 5th or 8th wins the whole thing, it's this year. West Coast Eagles, 15-7-97, defeated the Gold Coast Suns, 13-9-87. So it was a good West night on Friday. It was a good throwback night on Friday in terms of throwback jumpers and throwback songs, because the Eagles also brought out their original song, which just totally derided Victorians.
I have never heard this song.
Lines such as, "For years they took the best of us and claimed them for their own," and "So watch out, all you know-alls, all you wise men from the East."
I like that. Why'd they ever get rid of it?
I don't know. It does sound very, very 80s, but I like it. I'm not sure if I'm sold on the Navy jumpers. I'm okay with them as throwbacks, but the team played well across their 2 games into this year because they fought decently against the Swans in the using them as well. I liked this look for the Eagles from selection in terms of getting some younger guys in there. Harvey Johnston brought back in, as well as Tyrell Dewar and Clay Hall, who I was disappointed to see be the sub, but was brought in early because Harry Edwards got concussed and showed his worth in terms of following. A damn good runner. I was happy that he got time. Johnston and Dewar can contribute on the smaller end going forward. Dewar with a couple goals. And Zane Drew, we thought he would be out this week, but it was more of a neck stinger than a concussion. And he showed why he belonged in terms of pressure in midfield possessions. And I'm hoping that they get a contract in front of him soon. So I'm vindicated in terms of True, in terms of Jack Williams, another quality game from him. Where I'm not vindicated, where a lot of Eagles fans have been proven wrong, is Liam Duncan. Because, yeah, he had some skill errors early. But when the Eagles keep games close and when they win it, he's usually very closely involved in those efforts. And he kicked the winning goal off a step with 3 minutes and change left and got some important clearances throughout the night as well. He got the next center clearance that ended up leading to Jamie Cripps's check side finish as well. And also just the Eagles coming back in this game in the first place. 4-1 in the last to win it, when they were regularly down 3 goals in the middle quarters.
I have not watched any of this game yet, as I am working my way through the games that I've missed from, when we split up our responsibilities. Is there anything that, I will be validated by or shocked by that I should know about?
Well, what have been your thoughts about Ruben Jinby playing more halfback as opposed to on ball?
I don't know. I like him as a pressure guy.
I did as well, but if you think about them bringing Elijah Hewitt back in there after his recovery next year, And then when you actually watch what he did in the second half in terms of defending, I think you could be sold on Jinby playing in the defensive 50. When Harry Edwards went out concussed, it meant that the matchups looked even more fucked because there was no Tom Barris to begin with. Yes, Jeremy McGovern was in, but still a tough forward group there for the Suns. Ben Long did a good job against Brady Hoff. That's a really tough matchup for him there. I think some teams are starting to plan properly for Hoff, which is, testament to his worth. He's just 50 games in. But Jinby had some important intercepts in the second half and just read the flight of the ball well. I didn't think I'd be as sold as him playing back as much as I am, but I wanted to stay there at least for this next week against North and maybe through the end of the season to see if that can stick. The Eagles brought the heat early as they often do, and that resulted in some early clearance success, but the Suns caught up and took advantage of some Eagles back half mistakes. It took until after halftime for that pressure and clearance to come back, and really this whole game hinged on immediate stoppage success. It was more of a team effort for the Eagles and more of the Matt Rowell show there for the Suns with some assistance from Sam Flanders.
Well, that is refreshing for Rowell to play better because I've said the last couple of years we've seen him start really hot and then fade as the years got on. So that, I guess, is encouraging. What about Noah Anderson?
Didn't know nearly as much from him in this game. It was really more Rowell and Flanders, with Anderson being tertiary or even quaternary figure there. How about Mac Andrew playing forward?
I know he got a couple goals. Did it work?
I mean, he had 3 of them.
Okay, but how did their defense look?
You see, that was a bit of a question there. And also with Walter coming in there and some other taller players that you'll need to make room for, like Ethan Reed in the future, I'm left with some real questions about whether or not Andrew should be staying forward.
I mean, I like the idea of him being able to do both.
Sam Collins and Charlie Ballard did have their hands full against the combination of Oscar Allen and Jake Waterman. I'm not sure, though, if it would have mattered who was playing on them because their contested marking was above elite level, I would say. There were multiple 1v2 marks. The forwards themselves were willing to make contact at first, and Allen was involved more upfield early on, too, which I'd been calling for.
So you make it sound like the Eagles did much more to win this game than the Suns did to lose it. Would that be fair?
Yes, I would say that. And you got guys like Jack Darling contributing a bunch. In terms of groundwork, we know that he's got that pressure ability. I think his devotion to the waffle really sparked something in him and made him realize, I gotta really bring it and be a supporting figure, because this game from him was much better and much more involved. Now, there were questions obviously coming about Harley Reid where he would take on a lot and get caught a few times and get a little rattled. But I think the point is, get him the experience now, see where he is physically, mentally in game, and then coach from that. You've got a great raw talent, obviously, and you're not going to be able to improve that and really see what he's capable of by playing him down. The same goes for Harry Edwards. Yes, he was concussed, but he also had gotten beaten on some 1v1s early. You got to give Edwards and Hoff and those guys that top experience now, especially when you're looking at least 3 years down the road, probably closer to 5, before you may see actual success in any respect from this team again. So I think Jared Schofield has gone about some things the right way in terms of backing certain players in certain spots, Jinby in particular, and giving the younger players experience. This is something that I'd been waiting on and that Adam Simpson hadn't been doing. And I was saying these sorts of things in Dan Const from Backchat's Twitter space around 6:30 a.m. after this win, because this started 3:30 a.m. our time, and they were amazed that there was someone even tuning in for California and actually saying sensible things in the first place.
When I was thinking about this game, having not watched it, I thought about being disappointed in the Suns and how it feels like very little has changed between this time last year and this time now, other than that they have a different coach. And I guess, I've been impressed with Sam Closey, although he was pretty quiet in this game. But
I think there will be some of that disappointment there. Obviously, I'm looking more through an Eagles lens, and I've got a lot more to be positive about. Ben King getting back into form a bit with 3 goals. That was nice.
Because he was going through it.
Definitely was, and I expected this to be a better game for him given the depleted Eagles defense, and that was even before Jinby went out. So yeah, there'll be some disappointments there, maybe in terms of some of the defensive decisions. But I think you will feel that this was more about the Eagles winning it than the Suns losing. Now, the Eagles do have a chance to win a couple in a row now, but so do their opponents this coming week.
Well, that's a good segue. Because, yes, they'll be headed to Tasmania to take on North Melbourne 14-6-90, defeating Richmond 10-17-77.
Strange, by the way, that North have 2 of their final 3 games in Tasmania.
One of which is a home game, one of which is the Tasmanian... Is it the Tasmanian Tussle or the Tasmanian Timeshare Tussle?
Tasmanian Tussle for another 3 seasons after this, because it's the teams actually playing in Tasmania. When they're playing it in Victoria, that's a Tasmanian Timeshare Tussle. I do really think that the first game for the Devils should be either against Hawthorn and Launceston or against North at Blundstone Arena.
Got it. Expected score in this game, Richmond should have won by like 16, apparently. And, they did have 7 more scoring shots. But I actually thought the better team won this game. Luke Davies-Uniacke was a monster. Nick Larkey kicked 5. Tristan Jerry, another really big game. 11 hitouts to advantage. An octopus, that's 10 tackles. And that second level of player for North, once again, really stepping up. Bailey Scott with a big game. Tom Powell with another good game. And holy crap, Jackson Archer.
I've been saying this for about a month now. He's now grown physically to the point that he could take on the game the way he wants to, the way we always knew he would if you look back at his development and the way his father Glenn played. He's becoming a much stronger 1v1 player, and his disposals off that are sharp. I had seen this coming, and I hope that others had also. Overall, I think you would still say Archer's at that second level of defense for now. Maybe that'll change at the start of next year, but that second level between him, Aiden Core, and Jaden Stevenson were all much more composed, and we thought Stevenson was going to stand no chance at halfback whatsoever. He didn't last week.
I'm surprised he even got another game, but good for him. What a nice little redemption arc that was. He ended up getting a goal out of this game, had 8 marks, and just no, massive facepalm moments. Just the amount of negative plays he had in the Geelong game was pretty unbelievable.
Him and Apples both.
And what I've said about this North team the last few weeks was when they would make a mistake, it would just get ripped apart by the opponent. And, it was give them an inch and they take a mile. And that didn't so much happen in this game. This did not feel like a bottom of the ladder game. There weren't a lot of obvious skill errors. I mean, no, Richmond's kicking accuracy was not great, but I thought this was just a pretty entertaining watch.
There were definitely some moments in the first half where there were multiple skill errors a row where it reminded you, yeah, this is a spoon off, but nothing that constantly made you think, oh yeah, this is not worth anything at all. How about St. Dursma with maybe a Mark of the Year finalist, a clean hanger on Noah Balta, where Balta just knew immediately, fuck, this is happening.
There were a couple of really, really good marks across the course of this day.
We'll get to that near the end of the episode, but just always going to talk up the Dursmas for just their entertainment value, their skill, and also our connections to them. This just felt like a close game between closely matched teams. The Nankervis versus Jerry battle was great throughout the day. Nankervis with 15 hitouts to advantage himself. Just a good back and forth there. But between looking at the score lines and looking at the forward play itself, Nick Larkey's class really did shine through. 5 goals straight and 8 marks. I think Richmond also got a little bit of tunnel vision while looking toward goal at times. Missed some overlaps or deeper options and tried to back themselves in. I think there was at least one case where Dan Rioli had that happen, and I'm not usually one to criticize him, but he usually makes those better decisions. But yeah, Luke Davies-Uniacke had 3 goals. The third one was not pretty, but that was his first career 3-goal game.
I thought he was a pretty obvious best on ground, and coaches' votes agreed, he did get the 10. There were 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 perfect 10s in this round. 5 of them in games I watched, 5 that I agree with, and 1 that I haven't watched yet, so I can't really pass judgment on. I thought Nathan Broad was a really big positive for Richmond. He got my endorsement for the polished turd in this game with his 5 intercept marks.
When we finalize it ought to be his second in a row.
Liam Baker was also pretty sharp, although if he kicked more accurate instead of 2-3 could have been a different outcome for the Tigers, but I thought he was really sharp. 29 pressure acts, second most to only Davies-Uniacke's 30, 10 score involvements, just a nice overall game out of him.
I think Davies-Uniacke was just crucial in stopping Richmond from holding up the game by working through stoppages, and then Harry Sheezel's involvement off that helps take North to another level. Even when Sheezel isn't a vote getter, his presence is always really felt. You went from Davies-Uniacke helping burst through along with Sheezel to the Talls in general profiting and helping Nick Larkey not be doubled as well. Bryn Teakle important in there, Toby Pink as well, Eddie Ford getting back in. You've got such an obvious target that he's going to be more occupied, and if you don't have support around him, it's going to be much more difficult for him. You knew he wasn't going to get close to the Coleman podium this year, right?
Yeah, I mean, just needing that supporting cast, you need other guys to take the attention off you, unless you're like the greatest forward ever.
And we love you, Nick Larkey, but you're no Tony Lockett or Jason Dunstall or Peter Hudson or Buddy or God.
Favorite things about this game? I feel like North probably wanted the win more. I feel like North's fans wanted this more. I feel like Richmond fans will largely be content with moving closer to the number one pick. Seth Campbell, 15 disposals, 9 score involvements. That was another thing I liked.
Had you not really paid attention much to Seth Campbell watching Richmond this year?
I had some, but I hadn't seen him do that.
These past couple weeks, I've really noticed Campbell as one of Richmond's most positive players, especially for a first-year player. And these came in a couple closer games for them. They got to sign him up soon and through, 2028 or 9, because otherwise I know Tasmania will come calling for a native son like that. More composed by hand in recent weeks, too.
A relatively derp-free outing for Luke McDonald this 200 game. Actually, I think not just relatively derp-free. I don't remember a single negative moment for him. I thought he was fine.
By the way, I learned that Luke McDonald's father's name is Donald.
Donald McDonald.
No copyright.
But you know what my number one favorite thing about this game was?
Was it an individual thing or a more team-based thing? Because I thought North were the more level-headed team in defense overall. We talked about their defensive depth standing up.
My favorite thing about this game was that nearly 36,000 showed up, and that it was like a clearly pro-North Melbourne crowd. They had probably about 2/3 of the fans.
Of course it was a pro-North crowd. Richmond hate going to Marvel.
Ha ha. But actually, I was just happy to see North fans show up in good numbers and have something to be excited about. And I think as this team improves, like we've said, they've moved past rock bottom. I'm excited for their fans to have things to get excited about, because I can't find too much to object to about this team.
One other thing that I'm thinking about, I think Richmond could have used some more support for Dion Prestia in the middle. When he was able to succeed at stoppages, it sparked a lot for Richmond. And really, I think it came down to who won out between Davies-Uniacke and Prestia, and obviously it was the former. I know Prestia is such a frustrating one because we know what his ceiling is, even at age 31, but we also know how fragile his soft tissues are. I really thought he was an All-Australian at some point. He actually has never been. Watch the selectors still fuck over Wiedering and Treloar.
I mean, I think there are enough good midfielders where I can see Treloar missing. Wiedering, as long as he plays, I think he's got to be in.
Joe Long, 13-12-90, defeating Adelaide 13-7-85. Another opportunity for Andrew Gigach to put out his winning by a number of behinds tweets. And wait a minute.
Hold up.
I thought it was a shocking start from Fremantle.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Jared Healy, what were you on?
I mean, Adelaide and Freo look nothing alike. I don't know how he managed to make that one.
Well, just remember, the best person gets the job, right?
Was nowhere near the most interesting commentator line of this round.
Now, that was later on Saturday. But as the sun set on Cardinia Park, you and Cats fans were uneasy. I was napping a bit during this time, in and out of consciousness watching this game. Saw Adelaide go on their 5-goal run. I expected Geelong to bring it back. I just didn't think it would take as much effort as it did, but the Crows took advantage in some ways that I saw as similar to what North had done, getting out front of stoppages and quickly handballing from there. The third quarter and going into the fourth as they were getting on their run, that was their first resort.
I go back and forth between feeling good about escaping with the 4 points and being really concerned about the performance. I mean, this was a game that could have easily been put away very early, considering the Cats had a 15-0 lead that could have been much more if they had hit a couple of easier shots. Then in the third, stretched that lead out to 22, and it could have easily been more. So that Ollie Dempsey had a kick that barely grazed the post.
Barely.
There were a couple other opportunities to really break this thing open, and you felt like it was one goal away from being completely done.
You know what? I think Geelong did deserve to lose this game. You allowed Lucky Murphy to have a goal and 2 assists.
Like I've said, similar to how North made things difficult last week with those overlap sequences and handball runs through the middle, that's exactly where the Crows got on their run late in the third to take the lead going into the fourth and even got up by as much as 10. And the guy who really started that was Ben Keys, who, other than that sequence, like late in the third to early in the fourth, had a pretty quiet game, but he was huge in the Crows' best segments of this one. I thought their best player was pretty clearly, once again, Riley Philthorpe. Just such a forceful mark that the entire forward structure plays off. Although I will give credit, Jack Henry actually did a pretty quality job, only let him get like one lead. It was when he was matched up against someone smaller, like a Jake Kolajashny, that Philthorpe was really able to feast.
With Sam DeConing going down, I mean, we know that it's far from the worst prognosis for him, but are you concerned then, regardless of DeConing's status, in fact, are you concerned about how Geelong could match up come finals against those biggest targets?
No, I'm more concerned about this coming week in particular, because you've got really 3 big guys you got to worry about matching up with against Freo between Darcy, Jackson, and Tracy. Oh, Reece Stanley played in this game, and while Riley O'Brien did end up with 53 hitouts, only 13 were to advantage. That's below 25%. I'll take that any day. His hit-out success didn't really set up too much from the midfield. So Reece Stanley, not good necessarily, but good enough. Like, I just wish this was to spell Toby Conway instead of because there's really no other option. But like, if this is your backup ruck option, you can live with this. So good job, Reece Stanley. Seriously. And good job, Jack Henry.
Quieter game from Lawson Humphreys, but he had his first career goal to give the Cats the lead with 3.5 left. The reaction for that was immense, and I absolutely loved it. Are they using Kerncraft after like every goal now, by the way?
I don't think so. They've kind of mixed it up. I don't think songs correspond with specific players, though.
Yeah, because I thought I heard him use Kerncraft for Dangerfield.
Yeah, because they seem to just have like a playlist. And then Jeremy Cameron kicked his 6th after he flew in for a really nice mark. This was one of his best games after a pretty bad miss early. It was like a very Jeremy Cameron game that it wasn't just marking in the forward 50 and kicking goals. It was marking all over and leading into the forward 50 and just the entire forward structure stemming off of him.
I'm going to say it even though they only lost by 5. Fire Matthew Nix. You know exactly why.
Because Dan Curtin only got in with a couple minutes left?
When clearly their run of midfield success was over far before that, and you could have easily spelled Matt Kraft or someone else much earlier. You've been all about getting some of these younger guys an opportunity in terms of Billy Dowling, Zach Taylor, Hugh Bond, and Curtin has yet to get a full game. This is just plain disrespect. Not even getting him, 8 minutes of time on?
Tyson Stengel definitely got the better of Hugh Bond, by the way. It was a funky game because normally it's been the Cats win in one or both 50s to overcome the midfield. No, actually the midfield was better. Tanner Bruin and Patrick Dangerfield were both really sharp.
You see, this is why it frustrates me even more that he didn't get Curtin in there sooner. I would not be shocked if he ends up wanting to go home after this shoddy treatment by the whole Adelaide staff.
It was a very Tom Atkins game. 7 tackles, 10 contested possessions out of 19 disposals.
Welcome back. I know he'd been having a back complaint over the prior couple weeks.
Sean Manna was huge with pressure and just following the ball around. Crazy to think that he wasn't on an AFL list before this year and spent a lot of this year down in the 2s.
Well, with him now, the Cats are 6-1.
I don't think that's a coincidence.
No, I don't think it is at all. Even when he doesn't get a whole lot of tackles, he's only had 3 each of these past couple weeks. But the actual pressure is there, the groundwork is there, and you need that extra piece in the middle and a more mature piece as well. By the time a lot of you people will be listening to this, he will be 27. He turns 27 on the 6th.
You know, this is a game Geelong by expected score should have won by 35. I think what made this game so peculiar to me was the Crows having just like a very clear few standout players. Namely, Philthorpe, Keys in his moments, Lachie Scholl, whose just ability to set guys up is really good.
Smooth player overall, underrated.
was nice to have Josh Worrell back. And then I thought Jake Saligo was decent. But other than that, I mean, not a lot of standouts, whereas Geelong was a complete team. Like, this was a learning experience for Hugh Bond, especially. Tyson Stengel really got the better of him. Zach Taylor had a couple moments, but was mostly quiet. Billy Dowling didn't do a ton.
Bond has been given some difficult matchups, testing him right away. Got the better of Jack Higgins, but struggled getting more into the middle in his next game. I think he was up against Meriden, obviously that wouldn't go. Stopped Ginnivan for around 3 quarters, and then Stengel on another level. I like how Bond is being challenged, though.
It is so frustrating. You've got all that, and yet they won't do this with Curtin.
Meanwhile, Jared Schofield has given the Eagles youngsters shots in ways that Adam Simpson wasn't, and it's paid off in terms of a real fight against the Lions and a win this past week. Baptized them by fire.
Like, Curtin had that one bad game. But yeah, I think it was the draw against the Lions he really struggled, and it's like, give him more chances, especially with where your season is now. I get why at the time you weren't doing it, but now there's no reason not to.
And he wasn't even in at first this week. He was a late in when Brody Smith was taken out sick.
So on one hand, I want to credit the Crows for hanging around. It's a bigger picture issue with them. But yeah, Jeremy Cameron, I owe you my life. Boy, oh boy, where do I even begin? Jeremy, honey, my Pookie bear.
Another team tried to make Pookie happen this week.
Was it the Giants? I feel like it was a GWS thing.
No, it was Essendon.
Oh, okay.
For Sam Durham.
Oh, also, there was a terrible... I can't believe I forgot to say this. One of the other huge turning points in this game. Jeremy Cameron doesn't get paid an obvious high-contact arm chop free kick from Luke Nankervis that Charlie Curnow gets every time. So it goes for a behind. Instead of going up by 21, they're up 16, and right away the Crows come back down, and Josh Rochelle scores. Rochelle had a nice game. Featured in the coaches' votes a little higher than I expected, but I thought he was pretty solid. But yeah, that was an 11-point swing and huge in the sequences that gave the Crows the lead. Although, still, there was more than enough that Geelong could have done to stop those runs through the middle that it should have never gotten to that point. But that is a call that there's no doubt Charlie Curnow gets every time.
Charlie Curnow? Who was that?
A guy who didn't kick a goal this week.
Collingwood 12-12-84, defeated Carlton 11-15-81. Yeah, we're transitioning off that. The streak is dead at 66, and had we not mentioned it then, I'm not sure where we would have otherwise fitted in. Yes, the attention will go to Scott Pendlebury in his 400th, but also big credit to a couple of the Collingwood backs for responding very well over the past, I'd say, 3-week stretch now. Darcy Moore doing a good job on Curnow, and after Harry Mackay got off to a good start with a goal, Billy Frampton locked down on him. There was so much else to mention in this game, but I wanted to start with that because I feel like a lot of attention will go to the midfield and the pressure off which this game hinged. It's almost as if having Bo McCreary and Jordan DeGoey back until DeGoey did his hamstring really mattered in terms of Collingwood having proper pressure. And they were able to keep it up for longer, I think, off of McCreary being in above anybody else. This game was just fast-paced the whole way. The Blues tried to slow it down in the middle of the first quarter. That did not last. Just a frantic sort of affair the whole way through. The huge run from the Blues at the end. Carlton kicking the last 5 in a row to put it within 3 points with a little over 4 minutes left. And then just so many crucial possession wins from Collingwood from there. And then, yes, Mitch McGovern did miss completely after the siren. But I feel like that's almost a footnote, weirdly enough, compared to so much else that happened in this game. When I think about the best players for Collingwood, I think of some less obvious players. I think of Jeremy Howe being a spoiling machine. I think of Will Hoskin-Elliott being super functional with his 10 marks and 2 goals and setting up a lot of opportunities. And these are the types of guys that will usually get overlooked, and even more so on an occasion where you're celebrating one of the greatest players to ever wear black and white.
I will say Jeremy Howe, I think, got like the first interview, or at least one of the first interviews after the final siren.
Obviously, Pendlebury was there.
So clearly, Howe's efforts didn't go unnoticed. I was focused on the other game at this time as we split them up.
Why?
I mean, on paper, they were both good. So I have not watched much of this game yet. I did watch like the final few minutes pretty intently. But what I did get was they did seem to focus on not just Pendlebury, at least as the game ended, but on Howe and McCreary. So I think they gave the right players credit just off of that.
Hoskinelli being overlooked rubs me the wrong way, as I have already mentioned. I thought the Pies moved more freely in general, especially in the second half, and they won the territory battle in the third quarter as well. But as the game went on, Mitch McGovern and Jacob Wiedering kept the Blues in it with their defensive work, and the typical stars of Patrick Cripps and Sam Walsh lifted in the fourth, along with Matt Kennedy getting some time forward, which seemed obvious, but oddly enough hasn't been.
Kennedy was the sub, right?
He was, but he had more than a half because Adam Chera.
I think that's his 5th hamstring injury in the last 12 months.
Yup, not Wolf.
Interesting sub choice in this game. I know both got pressed into action relatively early, but Kennedy and Pat Lipinski.
Hey, Lipinski being the sub worked at the grand final, so he was put on late third quarter when DeGoey did his hamstring. He's probably done for the season at this point, and they didn't waste any time to bring in Lipinski.
I noticed he was on crutches after the game had ended, which...
It's at least 6 weeks for him, high grade. The inaccuracy of the Blues in the first quarter will come into focus. I think they just needed to be a bit more composed on their entries in general and maybe have the smaller options be more involved earlier on. The open play, by the way, was possible because he had both teams sending extras to each side, so a lot of the time it felt more like 5-on-5 in the midfield.
It's funny, even with that inaccuracy, I believe Collingwood ended up winning on expected score, which would go along with it being more about the quality of shots that they were setting themselves up for rather than actual execution of them.
And Collingwood were more apt to look for those shorter to mid-range options through the corridor and inside 50. The Blues returned to it late and ultimately too late. I also do want to question the tag decision to have Alex Chincata tag Bobby Hill. Now, they did do that in the first matchup this year and it went well, but with how quickly Nick Dacos started and how involved he was throughout, I'm surprised that that wasn't switched off. And Bobby still had enough of the ball himself.
Last year, this would have made more sense, but Bobby Hill has not been as great this year. He's been just kind of okay. So that makes it an even more perplexing decision. It's not like there's a recent run of form that makes this an obvious decision.
He kicked 1-4 from 16 in this game, Hill, and had a couple assists as well, so he got his opportunities. The insistence of keeping that matchup, though, for as long as it happened, felt off. And this puts the Blues in a position where they're looking at an early elimination final this week against Hawthorn. Holy cap.
I mean, I just filled out a ladder predictor, and I think they're going to be all right, considering their other two remaining games are the Eagles and Saints. But yeah, things could get a little messy if they don't win this one, although I think percentage will be good enough to bail them out so long as they win 14.
I will note Hawthorn end with Richmond and North.
Yeah, I filled out a ladder predictor that still has the Blues in 5th off of percentage. That does include them winning this week, but only by 4. As long as they don't get blown out, I think they should still be in good shape to make the 8 so long as they get to 14 wins.
Collingwood obviously still on the outside looking in, but they were back to a more normal formula in terms of both 50s, Mason Cox getting a couple goals and then doing his usual act.
Your percentage is not on Collingwood's side. They probably have to win out and get some help.
I also want to praise John Noble for defensive pressure because I feel like he slips under the radar. And when McCreary and Howe get focused in terms of midfield pressure and 1%ers, Noble gets lost in that mix. Not going to feature in any votes, but was important especially in the first half, and we're definitely John Noble fans here. And Darcy Cameron's contested marking was valuable too. May not have had as big stats in the ruck as Mark Pittenet, but obviously more use out of the ruck than the half-trick pony, even though Pittenet did set up McGovern's final shot.
A couple of the Collingwood fans we follow seem to really love the way Cameron's played this year.
In terms of the full field play, I am with them completely. And there's more flexibility for him to do his job now when he can get spelled by Cox or maybe even McStay.
I guess in a weird way, he kind of benefits from Brody Majacek's absence because it gives him more opportunities to go forward. Like, obviously, you don't want to have to play without Brody Majacek, but like from an individual standpoint, it gives Cameron more opportunities to show off his full skill set.
That's a strange way to think about things. I'm not sure if I completely agree with you there. in terms of just my check being another target and being the most reliable Pies goal kicker, that he'll automatically have a good defender occupying him. I can see your side, though.
Can I nitpick over something here? Attendance for this game, which was, sold out at least to the public like a month ago, was only a little under 87,000. There was that section down in one of the corners that was not very filled up, and then I'm going to guess it was MCC members not showing up once again.
I'm going to guess so because the camera angles that we saw, which look onto the Shane Ward stand, things look pretty full there. It's, the opposite of a lot of D's games where the MCC members area is a lot more full.
With the MCC members, after not showing up to see Melbourne play, they don't have time to see other teams play either. This drew less than Dusty's 300. That surprised me.
Benjamin, 78% of our listeners are between 18 and 35 years old, so they probably want to start a podcast like we did.
How did you know that number, Ethan?
Thanks to the analytics we have for Spotify for Podcasters.
Formerly known as Anchor, sorry Frio fans, Spotify for Podcasters has tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast from your phone or your computer. No fancy software needed.
It's so easy you can edit it while drunk.
And Spotify for Podcasters doesn't just allow you to upload to Spotify, you can also distribute your podcast on platforms like Apple, Stitcher, and more, just like we do.
Best of all, it's completely free.
Not only is it free, you can even make money from listener support or ad revenue. Hint, hint.
Download the Spotify for Podcasters app or go to podcasters.spotify.com to get started today.
Welcome back. This is, of course, episode number 197 of Americans Watching the Footy. I'm Ethan Castle.
I am Benjamin Castle, and you can find us on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and who knows what other platforms at Americans Footy.
Individually, I am on Twitter at Castle Media.
I'm at BenjaminHK01, and I very proudly wore one of my West Coast Eagles shirts to Petco Park on Saturday. And the photo of me was actually posted by the USD men's basketball coach, Steve Lavin, because we got to talking.
I'm going to guess your shirt got a grand total of 0 comments.
A couple from my classmates who knew about the Eagles, but there aren't many Australians that go to USD.
I'm impressed that you even have classmates that knew.
One of them is a big rugby union guy, and he's been to Australia.
Oh, cool.
He's also a Ravens fan.
Where's he from?
San Diego, but he was born in Maryland.
I think the MLR final was today.
Yeah, at Snapdragon Stadium.
I would hope he went.
I actually don't think he did, but he went to the All Blacks and Fiji match there a couple weeks back.
Well, congratulations to the New England Free Jacks on going back-to-back with their 2011 win over the Seattle Seawolves.
And people care.
The Seawolves seem to actually have a little bit of support.
Seattle fans go pretty ham. Where's our executive producer?
I think he just went under my bed. He's somewhere at ground level.
He also tweets from our account.
Yes, I've actually gotten a couple from him in the last couple days, one of which actually sort of was like a word. He typed "wee," which I think was an appropriate response to the outcome of one of Sunday's games. But before we get to Sunday, I guess we should finish off Saturday night.
Port Adelaide 22-16-148 put the Sydney Swans 5-6-36 through a 7-mile spanking machine.
They put the pussy on the chain wax.
He did that! He put the pussy on the chain wax!
Yeah, I think this is one of the right times for that, and it was just a comprehensive win all over the oval from the middle. I know Willem Drew got the perfect 10 and was one of the candidates you had mentioned to me.
Yeah, shut down Isaac Heaney. Also managed 32 disposals, 16 contested possessions, 11 score involvements, 8 clearances, and a couple of assists. For the first time, I will say I am officially concerned about the Sydney Swans. The prior games could chalk up to a couple of close losses. Every team has their hiccups. Missing guys facing a very informed Bulldogs team. Yes, they're still missing Justin McInerney and Tom Papley, but this was a level of getting shitted on that they had not achieved before.
I am really disappointed that the margin was 112 when 119 was so easily attainable.
The Swans are the second team to lose by triple digits this season, joining only Richmond. That we've only had 2 triple-digit margins this season is kind of an impressive feat.
And that Richmond also beat the Swans.
Just the entire thing. You combine all this together. The teams that are now in first and in 18th are the ones that have lost by triple digits, although now Sydney's grasp on first is not so secure. The minor premiership could be in jeopardy. I mean, still can't see them lower than second, but there is a world in which the Lions could totally catch them. I actually tip on my ladder predictor. I have the Swans losing this week to Collingwood, but then winning at Essendon and closing things out with an angry win over the Crows where they really take out some frustrations.
There's going to be an angry win coming soon.
The Swans, should they win even 2 of their final 3, will be in position where they won't have to go on the road until the grand final. But, I mean, they just got their asses kicked. They've had bad first quarters. No, this was to a different level. 45-0 at quarter time, 86-9 at half, 111-22 after 3. I will say there were moments in the second that looked better, even though it didn't entirely show up on the scoreboard. John Longmire used the word unacceptable many, many times during his halftime interview, and Port just crushed him from the midfield.
It's hard to find any positives out of this performance outside of, some strong statistics for guys like Brody Grundy and Errol Golden. I thought I was going to be way more invested in this game, flipping back and forth between this and Kolkar, and the AFL ending up with egg on its face for having these 2 games up against each other. No, their overlaps succeeded this week.
I mean, I guess the only way you could do it better is if you have 2 blowouts running concurrently. I don't know. Is it better to have 2 blowouts running simultaneously? Or is it better to have 1 blowout and 1 good game? Because with 2 blowouts, everyone's watching a blowout, but you knock out 2 of them at once. Whereas if it's 1 going and 1 blowout, there are going to be some people who are on the blowout. I'm sure that Port fans were still watching this instead of more of Kolkar.
I think it's better the way it is, with the option to look away from the blowout to something that's actually exciting.
So in that case, they nailed it.
Surprisingly so, yes. I think the only thing that wasn't nailed was this game being on FS1 rather than Kolkar.
Just a dominant showing from Port through the middle. Take your pick in addition to Drew. Jason Horne-Francis, Ollie Wines, who's been in a really nice little patch of games lately. Zach Butters, Connor Rosie. Dan Houston in the back, although I thought a lot of his stuff he kind of racked up once the game was out of hand, so I don't think I'd have him in my votes necessarily. Miss Georgiadis in the front was enormous. He was really...
Georgiadis and Willie Rioli with 4 goals each. Georgiadis he's probably going to be their leading goal kicker this year.
It's funny, for quite some time, it felt like, Georgiadis was kind of only able to play off Charlie Dixon, whereas now it seems like Dixon is playing more off of Georgiadis. And it is nice to see Dixon back into form after getting to the point where he got dropped and then ended up getting suspended down in the 2s and had to spend more time down there.
Yeah, Georgiadis, with 3 games left, has a 13-goal lead on Rioli.
Yeah, it would take something pretty wacky for him to not end up with it.
Now remember, he's coming off an ACL tear, hadn't played in the AFL in over a year, and has kicked at least 1 goal in 13 of his 16 games, and in fact, multiple goals in 12 of 16. But I think, like Riley Thilthorpe for Adelaide, Georgiadis worked a lot on his upper body and core strength while he was rehabbing his knee, just doing what he could in other capacities in the gym, and it's definitely showing.
It's maybe not as visibly obvious, because with Thilthorpe, it's a different level. There's nothing wrong with looking less ripped than Riley Thilthorpe. That's kind of 99.9% of the population.
But Georgiadis is definitely bulked up. I don't think it's as crazy a transformation as Brady Hoff either, but the effects are extremely positive. Because we've been worried about Port's forward look for a while, with Todd Marshall not as consistent, Finlayson and Dixon both showing clear signs of age. Georgiadis has really taken his opportunities this year.
So you haven't really watched any of this game yet, have you?
I've seen all the minis, but haven't really gone in depth, and I'm just looking through the stats, and all of these things check out with what I would expect from a dominant Port performance. Happy 150th to Lear. Active spoiling game against his old side. And yeah, he knows how to spoil against the Swans, if you recall. This makes 8 wins in a row head-to-head for Port.
I think you're going to have a tough time, because I have a really tough time figuring out who to give a polished turd to here, because, there's where's the good performances?
Based on the stats, I'm going to imagine that a lot of what Matt Roberts did was from fullback, having some kick-in time again.
I think it's between Golden and Heaney still. I think Roberts, there wasn't a lot of substance to it. This was really bad from the Swans. Chad Warner has really cooled off from his performances earlier in the year. Tom McCartan is not defending to the level he was. Harry Cunningham struggled. James Rowbottom still managed 7 tackles. Oh, Nick Blakey maybe, at least he got credited for his effort. He managed nearly 700 meters between his long runs and long kicks.
Okay, but how effective were those meters gained?
I actually think there was some value.
Okay, because you can have guys who gain over a kilometer and it doesn't really mean anything, like Aaron Hall used to, or Riley Bonner in one game this year. Looking at the ruck numbers, I wanted to know, how did that ruck battle shake out with Grundy being back in his home state? Was it more that Grundy succeeded on the initial ruck work, but Port made much more off of what Sweet did than Sydney did with Grundy?
I thought Sweet totally got the better of him regardless of the hit-out numbers.
Is it more what he did over the rest of the ground?
I thought his were just more efficient. Consider this. Exactly a quarter of Grundy's hit-outs were to advantage. Exactly half of Sweet's were to advantage.
And then if you're talking about the midfield success off of those with Drew beating Heaney, I can get what you're saying. I hope to be through with everything in this round before we get to our round 22 preview, which we'll record on our Tuesday night. You'll probably hear Australian Thursday. So maybe I'll have some more insights then, because this is not one where you can simply burn the tape. If this was an anomaly for the Swans, then maybe I still wouldn't, even if this were just a one-off loss because of how strong Port has been and looking at them as a potential finals opponent. But this is no anomaly. They've now lost 5 of their last 6, is it?
It's time to be extremely concerned. This is past a point where you can just blame it on missing guys like McInerney and Papley. This is a significant issue. Also, fun fact, if I had a nickel for every time a coach made a you suck sub against Port Adelaide in the second quarter this year, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice.
Was Geelong the first?
Yes. Now, Corey Warner was not just getting his ass kicked like Reece Stanley was in that game. And I think there were probably a few other guys who could have been candidates to sub out, but I think it was just Longmire wanting to send a message. He landed on Corey Warner, and midway through the second quarter, Luke Parker replaced him. If we're looking at player ratings, James Jordan was also very quiet and hasn't been tagging. Sam Wicks was pretty much invisible. By champion data, those were the 2 with negative ratings. Also, they played Peter Laddams as a second ruck, and he did nothing.
Well, he was a late in for Joe Amarty, but that's just management? Yeah, that rubbed me the wrong way, not just because of Laddams' reputation, but also that he doesn't have as much versatility as Amarty does, even when Amarty hasn't really done much since, the prior trip to Adelaide Oval. What would you say would be the solution for the Swans? Would it start with Jordan getting back to tagging?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a huge oversight not doing that, actually.
He's less of a midfield tagger. My first thought would be to put him to Dan Houston.
There are so many different ways you could employ him, but to not even utilize him as a tagger at all is a mistake. You remember at one point I was critical of how Port really didn't ever utilize the outside?
Well, now they've got pieces that are able to do that.
One player in particular has really opened that up for them, Logan Evans.
In terms of kicking toward the outside in the first place, rather than Dan Houston and Kane Farrell's kicks looking more inward? Is that the starting point?
It's just that they have an outside option.
I'll be interested in looking at his run and carry from this game, because when you're talking about Port on the outside, I would expect more involvement from Jace Burgoyne. 2 behinds from 18 for Jace, so he's still got his piece. But I think Evans just looking to the outside has mattered a lot.
Yeah, again, nothing Burgoyne did wrong, just other guys were even better.
On to Sunday was Grian's wee in reference to the game out at Monica Oval, which had the highest attendance in the ACT for an AFL game in 7 years.
I mean, it was just him walking across the keyboard. But this was awesome. GWS 12-12-84 defeating Hawthorn 12-10-82. Really close to a must-win for both teams. Now I feel pretty darn good about the Giants' chances of playing finals, although their remaining schedule is still a bitch. But they can now make it in by only winning one of their final 3, which are at Brisbane, home against Freo, and against the Bulldogs out in Ballarat.
If there's any win, you'll trust the Giants that game, right?
Probably. So, highlights of this game. GWS starts off up 10-0, dominant, can't capitalize. All of a sudden, they're down 27-12 at quarter time and trail by 21 in the second quarter. Hawks lead by 20 at half, open that lead up to 28 by three-quarter time, and then out of nowhere, the Giants come back and win. Tom Green kicks the go-ahead goal with 2:44 left. Jesse Hogan had cut it to 4 points less than a minute before that. Moving Brent Daniels into the center was the key to everything for GWS because they were getting absolutely clapped in clearances for three quarters. Jai Newcomb was at the center of that. But aside from him, it was really just a balanced team effort from the Hawks, who looked like the superior team, although maybe not 28 points better. There were a lot of Hawthorne people who were saying, like, we probably shouldn't be up by this much. Sam Mitchell even hinted at that in his halftime interview.
Well, if you're looking at the accuracy, then I'll understand that. It was 12 scores to 11 at halftime, and the Giants stormed home, kicking 7 goals, 1 to 1 goal, 1 in the fourth. Now, I'm surprised that Daniels was so much of the difference in the middle. Had Bedford been getting beaten as well? Had they brought Toby Green into some center bounces too?
No, Bedford actually did a pretty good job with what was asked of him. He was tagging Will Day and totally shut Day down.
But they still needed that extra piece there. I'm surprised they went with Binga over Toby. And even more surprised that worked. Our big thing with selection this week was seeing if Jack Gunston would come back in to try and shut down Sam Taylor. And he did, kicking 4 goals straight.
Great call by Sam Mitchell. Jack Buckley still got his, but Gunston really did a good job limiting Taylor. Deserves a lot of credit. And Sam Mitchell, great call. But he did catch some crap from multiple Hawthorne people we follow, including Brad Klebanski and Lauren Smith, because they didn't really do much to stop Lockie Whitfield out of the back. I don't have Whitfield in my votes, but he seemed to draw a lot of praise because 37 disposals, 10 marks, 10 score involvements.
You've got to put somebody on him. You think about what the Swans did in the derbies, sending James Jordan to him and how that totally dried up the tsunami. You've seen the game plan work, and I'm surprised more teams haven't tried to replicate it.
Yeah, even if Whitfield isn't like one of their best players, he is very significant to the structure of this team. But I think the player that really won in this game was Jesse Hogan. 17 disposals, 11 contested possessions, 11 marked, 6 of them inside 50, 5 goals too. The entire forward structure was off of him, and I had a feeling he could have a big game this week, knowing that James Sicily hasn't been great in one-on-one defending.
Josh Weddle, not really a match for him when he was tried. Outdid Frosty when that was tried too. Was just dominance all around, and he has the Coleman lead.
Sure does.
Well, that's what happens when you kick 22 goals in a 5-game stretch. 5, 4, 4, 4, and 5 the past 5 weeks. He's the first player since Tom Hawkins 5 years ago to have at least 4 goals in 5 straight. This is dominance from him later on in his career than people have expected, but it's such a great story that he's actually finally getting that. This is the largest 3/4 time comeback in the Giants' history, by the way.
Yeah, it's not a very long history, but 28 at 3/4 time is impressive, no matter how you slice it. From Useless AFL Stats on Instagram, Lockie Whitfield is 74 disposals away from passing 2016 Matthew Boyd from the Bulldogs for most disposals without a goal. Whitfield is at 580. The record is 653.
He'll get there.
As long as he doesn't kick a goal. Sam Mitchell is second at 652. Then 2019 Rory Laird at 623. Whitfield is also currently tied with 2019 Tom Stewart at 580. But yes, Daniels into the middle was the biggest move. I thought it was a really good Toby Green game. He ended up with 9 score involvements, and it was really every score late in the game was him and Hogan. Toby did have a massive dirk that nearly cost the Giants dearly. I thought there were 2 huge mistakes that were going to kill their comeback bid. First, a really bad Lockie Ash turnover that set up Gunston's 4th goal. Then Hawthorne getting a free kick instead of a center bounce because Toby came out of the goal square before a center bounce and they had nobody in there. And that's part of the 6-6-6 rules. You got to have a guy in each goal square. And that allowed Luke Bruce, who had come on as the sub for an ineffective Cal Sherdeer, to put the lead out to 16. But the Giants finished on a 19-1 run.
I'm surprised the Tom Green fan club didn't invade the Oval after his go-ahead goal.
Yes, that was a really cool part of this. He finished with another 25 disposals. Wasn't his biggest game, but obviously had the biggest goal of the afternoon.
Outdone, though, by Newcomb in the middle, and the Giants were as a whole until that switch was made with Daniels. When was that, really?
Really started the fourth quarter is when they went to it.
I know Joe Fonte was brought on as the sub late in the third quarter. Did he have a say at all?
Nothing especially remarkable, but Max Krzyzewski did pretty much nothing, so it was the right call. I would probably have kept Fonte in the 22 because I've really liked him.
I get they were trying to go like for like on the tall side with Jake McCarty out, and I think his absence was felt a little bit even with Hogan's dominance. Pleased with the high effort games from the smaller players like Binga and Darcy Jones at his helmet, and of course Toby Green.
Darcy Jones, even on a quieter day, just makes so much happen up front for this team. You noticed, and I'll say this every week, their scoring disparity without him and with him, even though he ended up just kicking 1-2, his 7 tackles were big. And then pressure-wise, you know who really saved him from getting absolutely crushed in the midfield was James Peatley.
Called it.
Octopus, game-high 29 pressure acts and 17 disposals.
There's a reason I picked this man up in our draft league for finals.
Other very significant pieces for Hawthorn that I want to mention. Blake Hardwick was kind of put in some tough one-on-ones at times with Hogan, but still made himself valuable getting the ball out of the back. I thought structurally for the Hawks, as much as they were dominating clearances, it was really 3 other players that were huge for their whole structure and ball movement. Those being Carl Amon, farthest back, and then Jarman Impey and Massimo D'Ambrosio, who once again was like over 95% efficiency. By champion data, he was the best player in this game. He had 95.5% efficiency. He's just been really clean with the ball, and I find it amazing that Essendon were never able to find like a place to really put him. This is a tough game for the Hawks to lose because I didn't think they did much to actually lose this game. I think the Giants just did more to win it in the biggest moments. Couple other random notes that I didn't have any other chance to really work in. Lloyd Meek largely outplayed Kieran Briggs. Definitely used the height advantage. Harry Himmelberg, another nice game. I didn't include him in my vote, but I think he deserves a mention. He also wasn't in the coaches' votes, but yeah, I think he deserves some consideration at least. I was shocked that Massimo wasn't in the coaches' votes, but Himmelberg just like structurally has been moving the ball out of the back better, been like more free-flowing instead of trying to make one specific play and telegraphing kicks. He ended up with a couple of assists and 9 marks. And yeah, as you touched on earlier, more than 13,000. Good Hawthorn showing, including the Prime Minister, as well as Buddy Franklin. Canberra likes footy. You're going to have no shortage of fans of other clubs because there are a lot of people that aren't from Canberra, which also I think helps contribute to the atmosphere. But like this, expand this stadium and give them Team 20. Let's do it.
So I didn't catch as much of Giants-Hawks live because I was coming back from the Padres game. And then when the drama was happening in the fourth quarter, I was focusing on the start of Essendon and Freo, the Bombers, 13-12-90, defeating the Dockers 14-5-89. Whoa. First matchup between these two teams at the G in a quarter century. And thanks to the fourth quarter, it did not disappoint.
All of a sudden, Essendon's finals hopes are not dead.
Freo losing robbed us of a completely non-Victorian top 5, so that's disappointing. The Dockers started this game extremely accurately and added clearance success in the second half after having a problem with that in the first. It was more Freo making the best out of fewer opportunities that was the story in the first half. They had 9 goals from 18 entries, Essendon 6 goals from 33 inside 50s.
Well, a couple of times, Essendon made the mistake of just letting Hayden Young run through the middle, which seemed like a really bold strategy.
Yeah, Young was let go, so Wrong lifted his work rate as well. I liked how Andrew Brayshaw played all over the oval this game, going back and supporting in defense as well. Freo got numbers back in defense and communicated, I'd say, better than Essendon throughout this game. And it was more Essendon creating contests and getting forward half turnovers that had proved to be the difference. Jai Caldwell earned the perfect 10, and his midfield and contest work enabled Essendon as a whole to move as they liked. Dylan Shield with some big clearances, 3 of them early in the fourth quarter. He had 5 score involvements from his 7 disposals in the fourth and was 100% efficient in the game. Shield extremely functional, having Darcy Parish in there makes a big difference still. We weren't sure how Parrish would be right away, but he had some center wins also. And it was his runs post-clearance, all with Zach Merritt and the one-point hero Sam Durham, that proved to be the difference in the end. After Essendon took the lead off of a Jade Gresham goal with 8 minutes left, and then got another goal off the next center clearance from Kyle Langford, they tried to grind out the rest of the game as best they could, but Jai Amos tied it with 36 seconds left. It was caught high by Jaden Laverty. Amos with 4 goals. I'm surprised you didn't mention him earlier. Didn't do as much physically as Josh Tracy, who was kind of clowning Ben Mackay early on. But off that last center bounce, Jai Caldwell kept Caleb Sarong out, kind of walled him out. Zach Merritt beat Hayden Young to run onto Draper's hit out. He handballed for Sam Durham, and Durham kicked a point. This is a situation like Collingwood and Adelaide last year, where I wonder if Durham intentionally kicked the point.
Like, you're not opposed to a goal there. I think just the priority you're thinking to yourself is, I got to get this somewhere through any sort of sticks.
For so much of this game, I felt like the conversation was going to be about Essendon's defenders not doing enough. It really looked that way 3/4 time because Nick Cox and Jaden Laverty weren't good matches for anybody. But in the fourth, I will credit Ben Mackay for finally standing up to Josh Tracy physically and making and winning some actual contests there. And then the team as a whole kept on the pressure, got the ball in the forward half a good amount, and made the most of their opportunities in front of goal. Congratulations to Archie Roberts for the one-on debut, a physical debut for him. Getting a number of tackles in there in an 18 disposal effort. He did not look fazed by the situation at all. And it was interesting seeing Nick Bryan get the call to be a second ruck, but he played 3/4 and change and allowed Sam Draper to go forward and be a more full field mark. And Draper had the last intercept mark as well that sealed the game.
This puts a serious dent into Frio's top 4 hopes because this is another team whose remaining schedule is a bitch. Home against Geelong, at GWS, home against Port. When I fell on my ladder predictor, I have them winning 2 out of these 3, only losing at GWS, but I have them finishing down in 7th now.
On percentage?
No, at 14-8-1, just there's a whole block of teams with 15 wins, and I have them between the teams with 15 and GWS, the other team with 14.
You could really be looking at Port and Freo round 24 as a top 4 decider.
I still have Port making the top 4, even with Freo winning that, because Port keep it close enough to stay ahead of Carlton on percentage. There's going to be a lot of percentage math and stuff as the season winds down.
It was interesting seeing how this game flipped between the first half and the second, with Freo having had fewer opportunities but being more efficient, and then still getting some clearance success in the third, but having some of their inside efficiency going away. It was an interesting sort of mix there. And I want to credit Nick Martin for having a strong, full oval fourth quarter. Noticed him in terms of the start of some chains or near the start from the back, but also had 2 goals early in the term. So just impacting play everywhere like we know he can.
You know, even though we've been a little bit critical of him at times for kind of racking up empty possession numbers, I like him. You know why I like him? You can tell he gives a shit.
St Kilda, 5-9-39, defeated by the Brisbane Lions 19-10-24. Make it 9 in a row for the maroon, blue, and gold, or, well, red, blue, and gold in this game because it was in Victoria. Happy 200th, Froggy.
Do you want me to start with the positive or the negative?
Are the negatives for the Saints everybody except Matthias Philippo?
No, they actually had a couple other positives.
In what category does their late change debut fall?
Angus McLennan was a positive. I think they had 3 players that weren't disappointing, and they were McLennan, Philippo, and Zach Jones.
So you're saying we shouldn't be sending people degrading Instagram messages?
Well, on the other hand, you could also make the argument that he's better now because of those messages.
Damn it. When I see the Saints only kicking 5 goals, I think there's 2 ways about it. Either they tried to play quickly as they did in the fourth quarter at the Gabba, and that didn't work, and they got beaten over the top, or they just did total Ross ball and still got beaten by a better and more decisive team.
Yeah, this game was the ugliest version of Ross Ball. When you think of bad Ross Ball, you think of a team just kind of passing it around without any sort of purpose to it. And that's exactly what they did throughout this game. They just kind of passed it around in the back and in the middle with no sort of intention to ever get further forward.
And it looks like this was a relatively high stoppage game, which I told you would play into the Lions' hands because Oscar McInerney would be a tough matchup for Rowan Marshall.
I mean, yes, McInerney was better than Marshall, and I said body-wise that would have been a tough matchup for him. You're not the only one who had identified that. I had too. But it looked like a very aimless game from the Saints against a Lions team that was dominant in the middle, did a good job getting forward. There was a lot of the usual suspects for Brisbane. I thought Cam Rayner was awesome. Hugh McCluggage continuing his recent run. More good work out of Lachie Neal. Cal Achi has been pretty up and down. This was an up for sure. He's been up for a couple of weeks in a row.
And that's been really necessary for him to be up, especially on the forward side of things, considering who they've been missing and how he's been tasked with some Lincoln McCarthy-type jobs. Thinking about Rayner, though, I said this in one of the more recent episodes, he's now been combining all of his physicality, his sprint speed, and better decision-making. And I think you saw all of that in his Goal of the Week nominee.
I think he could have been given the Ashcroft Medal a week earlier, and I think he might get the 3 votes in this game. Broadcasters in this game were debating between, I think, him and Neal. I think you can make an argument, despite his 13 clearances, to put Lachie Neal further down the ballot, and that's no knock on him. It's just that a bunch of other guys had really good games as well. Again, McCluggage to highlight. I love the way Kai Lohman plays, another 8 tackles from him. Will Ashcroft looks like he hasn't missed a beat. McInerney was the superior ruck, as I've said. And then defensively, Harris Andrews always gets the credit he deserves. This year, Ryan Lester has gotten much more appreciation, but Brandon Starcevich has slipped under the radar, and the last 2 games in particular, he has been phenomenal, and I tweeted about it, and it seemed to get a lot of positive recognition. So I'm just happy to know that other people are seeing this. The way he's been cleaning up the back, both in the air and at ground level, and sending things out the other way, he's been exceptional lately. And I would include him in my votes. I'm really glad he got into the coaches' votes. Only 14 disposals, but half of them contested. 7 marks, 5 spoils, 9 intercepts. Just really fundamentally sound back there. And I think he's stood out. And I appreciate, again, him shaving his head because it made him easier to differentiate from some of the other guys.
Because that's what's important.
I like being able to tell people apart. Some stats of note for this game. I look at team stats that really stand out. The Lions only 16 more inside 50s, but 60% efficiency inside 50 to St. Kilda's 38.5. Lions winning hitouts 47-23 and clearances 48-27. And they had 43 more contested possessions while the Saints had 13 more uncontested.
I mean, those are very characteristic stats for the Saints, regardless of result, I would say.
Yeah. But when it comes with a negative result, again, that's the ugly side of Ross Ball. Other things I want to highlight. Haven't mentioned Jasper Fletcher yet. I think he's been another one who's just locked himself in as a regular component of this team. 19 disposals, a goal, 7 marks, 3 assists. Zach Bailey, I think he's just kind of been quieter this year, and that's by no fault of his own. Again, it's just other pieces have been really good, but Bailey ended up with 3 off 20 disposals.
Bailey, I've been mentioning all the time as one of my favorite Lions, and he'd been quiet for a lot of this year, but has now scored goals in 4 straight games. This is actually his first 3-goal game of the year, and his first in general since round 8 of last year against the Blues. There have just been more smaller players there in that mix. Ashcroft, Fletcher, you can count Rayner among that smaller side, and Lohman, of course, asserting himself even over Charlie Cameron this year. But Bailey is still one to watch out for, and having that many small threats in addition to a couple tall threats, well, more so just one this game, but usually with Eric Hipwood healthy. I mean, you got so much to worry about in terms of this entire Lions list, especially how many angles and options they can take when they're attacking. And for a team that values defensive control, that's an extremely difficult task.
Couple of mind-blowing stats about this game. This was the lowest ever St. Kilda score against the Bears, Lions, or Fitzroy. They had never scored less than 70 against Fitzroy, And their previous low against the Brisbane Bears was 45 in 1994. Their previous lows against the Lions, 48 in 2020 and 50 in 2007. I was shocked by that, like, especially considering, how you perceive St. Kilda's history.
Yeah, but Fitzroy was pretty shit for the final, 3 decades, if not more, of their existence.
And yeah, I don't think the Brisbane Bears had an especially great history either.
I know they made a prelim in 96, which set up a lot of their post-merger success. Looked like it was a better game from the younger talls for the Lions as well. Logan Morris and Henry Smith.
Yeah, Smith, for the first time, really looked like he belonged in there. I was surprised he got another game, and I'm glad he did because he proved himself.
I'm thinking maybe he got that game because there was an injury cloud on Hipwood in the first place, though I'm surprised it was Bruce Reville who was the late in. Glad to see him get another game, though. And as for Smith, you said last week he hadn't ripened yet. Are you changing that belief now?
It's starting to get there. Oh, and we had another victory cigar in this game. Reville coming in for Charlie Cameron after 3 quarters. Cameron was getting his hamstring iced, but team said it's just normal post-match treatment, and Cameron seemed to be in a good mood the entire time. So yes, that is definitely a victory cigar by those measures. Yeah, I think the main positive for the Saints, and really the only one that I'm really going to think of from this game, is Matthias Filippo. Because remember earlier this year and at times last year, it was like if they weren't getting the ball to him up front, he wasn't having any sort of impact, and it led to him getting dropped.
He's broadened his impact all over the oval.
Yeah, even in a game where they were rarely forward, they were under 40 inside 50s, he still managed 24 disposals. And they were like high impact. You can see him just running hard everywhere.
A goal and 5 clearances for Filippo as well. Disappointing that he missed the prior 2 games with that hip injury, because he was even one of the better players in the rain in Adelaide in round 19, was crucial in making me have to walk from San Diego to Los Angeles. There's a lot you could do with him, and him succeeding despite everything else that went against the Saints in this game.
Yeah, he is reaffirming why he was such a high draft pick. I know he ended up with 13 intercepts, but I was not impressed with Josh Battle. He had a couple of turnovers and lost some one-on-ones. I was like, really? Teams are talking about paying him how much? I know Hawthorne's been linked to him a bunch.
Him and Tom Barris both.
Who else have I heard Barris in connection with? Remind me.
The Bulldogs.
Yes.
And maybe Collingwood, but less so.
Oh, by the way, there are now apparently talks about Geelong and Jake Waterman.
I've heard Melbourne with him as well.
Well, I can tell you the Hoops crew people seem to want to talk a lot about this. Still, if I had to pick one player from the West, I think you know who it would be. It's one who hasn't been linked to coming back to Victoria at all yet.
It's Hayden Young, I know.
Yes, it's Hayden Young. Ooh, before we get into main character and stuff,
fuck the wild card.
Oh, I was just going to ask if there were like any other like random odds and ends you wanted to mention that you forgot, because there were a couple that I forgot. A week ago, I was singing Jed Buse' praises. I thought he moved the ball well again, but he did not keep up with Josh Rochelle and should not be in that sort of role.
Do you expect he'll be dropped?
I hope not. I don't think he merits getting dropped. I just wouldn't use him in that situation. And I forgot to mention the Dermot Brereton line.
Oh my gosh.
I would almost consider making him a main character nominee, because he compared what the power we're doing to the Swans to Pearl Harbor. Now, note, I was not offended by that comment, but I was surprised that he said it.
Well, if Sydney goes on to win the flag, you could actually say they lost a battle but won the war, just like Pearl Harbor.
Maybe Pearl Harbor can be their Oppenheimer.
And again, fuck the wild card, which seems like it's on the cards for next year.
Once we get to 20 teams, sure. But until then, no.
There will be so much less drama.
But I think there would still be just the way this year is shaking out. Because I think just the order of the top 8 is going to be interesting, even if we get more of a picture of who the top 8 are going to be. There's definitely going to be a race for 4th.
Well, are they just going to go 7 playing 10, 9 playing 8 in what was the pre-finals bye week?
I mean, if so, I wouldn't entirely be opposed to that, because it means one less week without footy.
That would, though, take away from AFLW round 1. And also there's another way to do it where you just give the top 2 byes, and then 3 through 6 could have a double chance.
Yeah, I think you could totally make a case for about 9 to 10 teams to play finals this year. The issue is that there would be some teams that are not deserving that would still be in contention. That's where I take the most offense with this. Because then, like, Melbourne's finals hopes would still be alive. I'd say the Suns would be just about dead, but I think Melbourne would still be alive, and I don't necessarily think they should be. All right, nominees. You want to take us through Mark of the Week?
Sure thing. Your round 20 winner was Cam Zerhar getting leverage on Mitch Duncan. I really valued that one.
I actually thought Charlie Combins was better, I believe.
Your runners-up this week. Noah Volta got a knee to Nick Larky's back in the fourth quarter of Richmond's loss to North, and Esava Radagalea nearly sat on Aaron Francis's shoulder. Those pale in comparison to Zane Dursma with a potential finalist on Brownlow night. Nearly straddling Noah Volta. It was the knee of his back leg on Volta's shoulder.
It was amazing. It was the obvious winner, and it's a shame because Esava's would win most weeks. I thought the Esava mark was awesome. But you can rank these pretty easily. Dursma 1, Esava, quality 2nd, Balta 3rd. Your round 20 goal was Zach Merritt taking a Jade Gresham handball, running towards the left corner and hitting this high snap that I'm not sure if he was looking for a mark in the goal square or was actually trying to kick a goal, but he got the goal, and I think it's one of the best of the year. But I think we also have 2 really good ones this round. We have Harry Mackay beating Billy Frampton on the left boundary for a crumb, and then kicking a 4-bouncer from deep in the pocket just before the quarter-time siren.
Yeah, that tied the game at 14.
It was funny after all the set shots the Blues missed that they got that. You've got Hayden Young ripping his way out of the middle, bouncing twice and kicking from 45. And you've got Cam Rayner spinning out of a Josh Battle tackle attempt in the right pocket, taking 3 steps and kicking with his left on. I think Mackay and Rayner are the clear top 2, and I'm going to give it to Mackay by just a bit.
I was pretty set on Mackay being the winner as soon as I saw it in terms of the difficulty of the kick. I don't think we've seen as good of a bouncer or roller since maybe Bailey Fritsch.
Yeah, that's fair. That's what I was thinking as well.
I was wondering if Tyson Stengel had it, but I think all of his have been on the full. Your round 20 main characters were abnormal objects on the oval because you had the Essendon fan throwing their scarf and a likely dead seagull crashing down onto the MCG turf when Collingwood played Richmond. I know you mentioned Dermot Brereton as a nominee. There are a few others you could bring up. Obviously, Scott Pendlebury at his 400th. Jesse Hogan for his 5-goal showing I want to put up there too, especially because he took the Coleman lead.
Jeremy Cameron kicking 6 and saving his team.
Sam Durham for the point.
I think this one's going to have to go to a poll, yeah?
I think there's no other choice. Might be even tough for us to narrow it down to 4.
I mean, the Swans just getting the shit knocked out of them. But I know we try not to make a team the main character whenever possible. We try to make it an individual or couple of individuals.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of ways you could go with this one. I think Pendlebury might have had it before the game, and even though he had a good showing with 9 clearances, might not even get into our poll in the end. That's amazing.
Yeah, I don't think he was really like, you know, even though it was his night, I don't think he was really the center of attention, which I think is actually kind of on brand for him.
Very. So look for that poll at Americans Footy on Twitter. We'll post the options on Instagram as well. Encourage people to go over from that.
Yeah, get that poll up like as soon as possible.
I'm at Benjamin HK01 individually.
I'm at Castle Media. Our executive producer is Cat Named Ryan on Instagram.
Thank you once again for tuning in. The end only gets pointier.